Jam Jar Sews, and I'm here for another project with the lovely people at Bombay Stores Fabrics. So today we're going to be making a nice shirt dress using the M8030 pattern from McCall's, which again was available with the Love Sewing magazine in June, I believe. And it's got 3 different versions, so A, B and C. So there's this shorter sleeve version without the belt, there's the longer version B with the belt, and then there's the one I'm going to make, which is the longer version with the belt, but it's also got this nice curved hem, which I think will be a really nice effect. So for this, they recommend using shirting fabrics, poplin, because it's kind of, it's a shirt dress. And I'm actually going to be using this really gorgeous bright pink fabric from Bombay Stores Fabrics. So as always for my projects, the first step is to wash your fabric. The next step is to take your measurements, which I've done, and then to cut out your pattern pieces in the right size. Now this for me is like a relatively complicated pattern compared to the other ones I've done on this channel because it's got a lot more pieces. So it has a back and a front yoke pieces, which are kind of like this is a front yoke piece, will go along here and into the arm, so you get that nice wide sleeve. So we've got 2 pieces for the front, and then for the back it's cut on the fold, it's one continuous piece. So we have this large yoke piece here. Then the back dress piece, this is going to be quite long, so this is my big back piece. And then you have your 2 front pieces of the dress as well. Then there's a belt piece, and your sort of like, it's got like, I think it's called a placket that goes down the center as well where your buttons go. So we've got the placket piece here, and then we've got the collar front facing as well. We have pocket pieces as well. First step is working on the front pieces. And as part of this, you need to do your tailor's tacks, or however you like to transfer your markings, your notches and your small circles, big circles. I've done a video on this channel about making a shift dress where I talk through how to mark those up. First step is to gather between these 2 small circles for where we're going to attach the main front piece to the yoke. So for gathering, I'll do 3 lines of long stitches. So I use a 4 stitch length on my machine, whereas I would normally use a 2 stitch length. So once you've gathered your front pieces, the next step is then to attach your yoke. So you do that for both of your front pieces, and then you complete the same process on the back. So again, gathering between the 2 small circles, although obviously because the back's cut on the fold, you've only got to do it once. So the first step for the pockets, I can appreciate it's a bit hard to see here because obviously the fabric doesn't really have a right side and a wrong side, but you're going to take your pocket bags, you should have 4 of them, and you're going to pin them into each of your side seams. And you have a notch on your pocket bag piece and a notch on your side seam, and you just match those 2 together and pin the pocket bags on right sides together, and then you attach that with a 1/4 inch seam. So once you've sewn the pocket bags onto each side seam, you then press them out with the iron just away from the seam, and then you pin your front pieces to your back piece, and you then stitch. And you go all the way from where the armhole is down to the pocket. And then in order to leave your pocket open, you go down to the small circles that you've noted, go around the pocket edge here, again to the small circle, and then all the way down. Now, the next step after doing the pockets is then to sew these shoulder seams together. We'll do that with the 2 front pieces, attach the 2 back pieces right sides together. Once we've attached the front and back pieces at the shoulder seams, the next step is to do the front band where the button and the buttonholes go. So the first step in doing the front band is to press under the unnotched edge by 1 centimetre. So I've done that and I've pressed that down with the iron. And then basically you're going to do right sides together, so you can see where that folded over edge is here, and you're going to place the notched edge against the edge of your front piece, and you're going to stitch that all the way down using a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So once you've stitched down that front edge like that. So that's the dress, and that's the front band there like that. You're then going to trim down this edge here. So you're going to trim close to the stitching line, and then you're going to press the band away. So you're starting to get that look like a shirt, but you're going to press the seam allowance towards the band. So the seam allowance will be up like that, but the band will be pressed away from the shirt. Next step is then to kind of fold that front band in half. So you can see if I show you the inside here, you fold that front band in half, and then where you pressed that edge earlier, you use that to sort of capture that raw edge that you've just trimmed down so that it's all neat and covered inside. And I've pinned that all the way down, but actually when we stitch it, we'll stop 5 inches before the bottom, because that helps when it comes to doing this, the bottom hem. And then what we do is we edge stitch as close. So basically all we're doing is stitching as close as we can to this line of stitching here. I'm going to use my presser foot and probably end up sewing, you know, like a couple of millimeters away. I'm going to line it up with my press foot because I want it to be straight, because this is going to be kind of evident on the front of the dress. The next step is to start attaching the collar, but just before we do that, we are just going to stay stitch this neckline, including the front bands. And all that is doing a quick line of stitching about 1/2 of an inch away from the edge, so within the seam allowance, and that just allows us to keep the curve in place whilst we attach the collars. So with the collar pieces, I've interfaced both pieces, but the first step is just to turn up the seam allowance, which is 5/8 of an inch, on one of the pieces on this double notched, single notched edge here. And we're going to turn that up by 5/8 of an inch and press it. And then it says to trim down that seam allowance to 1 centimeter. So once you turn that edge up and you've trimmed it down, the next step is to take your other collar piece and pin them together on this long edge, right sides together. And then you're just going to stitch all the way around here. And then once you've done that, you're then going to trim that seam allowance here. And then we're going to turn it inside out before we attach it to the dress. So once I've sewn together my collar pieces along this long edge, I trim the seam and also clip the curves there to help me turn it inside out. And then I turned it in and pressed it to try and make it as crisp as I could. Not quite perfect, but almost there, I think. So the next step is to attach this to the dress. And what we're going to do is pin this raw edge to the raw edge of the neckline here, including these front bands. And when we're doing this, when we stitch on, we're going to make sure to keep that pressed edge free. That's really important for the next step. Okay, so once I've sewn my collar onto my neck piece and got it fitted like that, I've then done a similar thing to the front band, and basically you flip over the collar bit that has the pressed edge to the inside of the dress. And then again, you can cover that raw seam that you had where you attach the collar to the dress, and it encapsulates the raw edges. So again, just like we did with the front band, we're then going to edge stitch around the collar. Okay, so we've now sewn the collar on and edge stitched it. So we've got this nice crisp collar here with that interfacing, and it kind of lines up with the front bands as well. So the next step in the pattern is to hem the sleeves, and it's up to you how much you hem these by. The pattern recommends a narrow hem. I think I'm actually going to fold mine over twice. So I'll fold it in and press it and then fold it again and stitch it down to hide my raw edge, but that's completely up to you. So I've hemmed my sleeves now, and then the next step in the pattern is to do the hem, but I'm actually going to do my buttons and buttonholes first, and then I'm going to try it on and see how I want to hem it, because it's come out a lot bigger than I expected. The back of it in particular is a lot larger than I was expecting. I think if I made this again, I'd actually cut a size down. And for the buttonholes, it actually has a pattern piece which provides a guide, which is really handy. And there are 8 buttonholes in total, and it says to put the buttonholes on the right front piece, which I'm not sure if that's like my right or facing me. I've always had issues with left and right, so I've just put it on the neatest side, because obviously that's the one that's going to be in front. There's also, the pattern says about adding a button on this collar. I'm actually not going to do that because I don't think I'll ever do it up. It's a bit tight for me around the neck. It's, again, not really my personal style. So I'm not going to add that. But what I'm going to do is for each of these buttonholes, there's a sort of start and an end point, which shows you the length that the buttonhole should be, and then there's this center line. And I'm just going to transfer these markings, I think, using tailor's chalk, and then I will sew in my buttonholes using my buttonhole foot. And on my previous video on this channel, making a shirt, I talk you through how to do that with your buttonhole foot. And then I will hand sew my buttons on, as again I did in my previous shirt tutorial. But your sewing machine should, if it comes with a buttonhole foot, which most of them do, it should also give you your own personal instructions for your machine on how to use it. So I've sewn in my buttonholes and attached all of my buttons. My final step is then just to hem the dress. So as I said, I'm doing the version with a nice curved hem. So it's got these splits on the side and then a split in the front as well. And there are various instructions in the pattern about, you know, basting so that it helps the curves to sit. I've actually just pinned mine normally like I would a normal hem. I've turned it up by about 1 centimetre. So with the hem done, that's our shirt dress completed. So there is the option with this version to make the tie belt, but I tried mine on. I think it looks better with just a normal, you know, leather waist belt. So I'm actually not going to make the tie belt for this version, but that is something you can do. But in any case, I hope you really enjoyed this tutorial and you found it helpful. If you do make your own shirt dresses, please share the pictures with us at Bombay Stores Fabrics and at Jam Jar Sews. We'd really love to see what you make. Thanks so much for watching. Bye!